Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and a very warm welcome to viewers joining TR Business from different time zones and geographical territories for the second iteration of the Travel Retail Sustainability Forum, coinciding with the virtual Summit of the Americas. We'd like to thank all of you joining us from the Summit of the Americas virtual event organised by IAADFS and Acetil in association with the Moody Davitt report, together with all those connecting directly via Zoom for this integral and important session. I'm Luke Barrett, Acting Managing Editor at TR Business, and together with my colleague and co-moderator, Michael Barrett, Head of CSR and Events, we'll be conducting a thorough examination of travel retail sustainability credentials in this dedicated session, with perspectives from an airport, supplier, cruise line and cruise retailer. They'll be discussing current and future plans to encourage a cleaner and greener future for travel retail. Now, for the uninitiated, the Travel Retail Sustainability Forum was conceived in 2019, initially as a dialogue on social media to foster greater awareness of the circular economy, with a particular emphasis on the reduction of single-use plastics. That's grown into something much broader and more important, a coalition of industry partners dedicated to meaningful and concerted change for travel retail and the broader travel and tourism ecosystem. And this has been led, or as a response rather, to the increase in consumer-led activism. So the first TRSF session was hosted in a virtual format last year during TR Business's TR Marketplace event. And we encourage each and every one of you viewing this session today to join the sustainability debate, sign the Travel Retail Plastic Pledge, and we'll be providing further information on the Sustainability Forum and the Plastic Pledge online following the conclusion of this session. Now, we have an experienced and highly influential lineup of panelists today, all keen to share their perspectives on travel retail sustainability journey and the opportunities and challenges facing their respective businesses. Offering a supplier's viewpoint is Andy Batchez, Director of Environmental Health and Safety at Brown-Forman Corporation. From the airport side, I'm happy to welcome Cheryl Nashier, Revenue Development and Management Director at San Francisco International Airport. Joining them is Jill Stoneberg, Director of Social Impact and Sustainability at Harding Partner Virgin Voyages, and Mark Burney, Director of Business Operations and Deputy Managing Director at cruise retailer Harding. Before we begin the session in earnest, I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Michael Barrett for his introductory remarks, some housekeeping notes on this session, and further information on our trailblazing Travel Retail Sustainability Week, a 5-day virtual event beginning on the 19th of April. Michael, over to you for more information.
Thank you, Luke, and hello, everybody. My name is Michael Barrett, and I'm Head of Events and Corporate Social Responsibility at TR Business. So I'd like also to add my thanks, as Luke did, to the Summit of the Americas organisers, IAADFS, Acetil, and the Moody Davitt report, for inviting us to host this sustainability session during the Summit of Americas event. And we were due to launch the inaugural Travel Retail Sustainability Forum back this time last year at the Summit of America's physical event in Florida, but we all know what happened there. So it's great to be here, albeit virtually, this year. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. And as Luke's already said, thanks to our speakers. So the purpose of this session, and as Luke alluded to, the Travel Retail Sustainability Week in a couple of weeks' time, is really to showcase best practice in sustainable business practices, discover new sustainable business practices, share some of the bumps along the road in the various stakeholders, airports, retailers, brands, and their partners have been facing on their sustainability journey. We want to understand some of the consumer feedback as well. What do consumers say about that sustainable packaging or the new sustainable bags, single-use plastic-free bags at such an airport or by such a retailer. And we want to also discuss the cost of going green, because obviously it represents an investment for some, Obviously it's not negligible. So all these questions will be discussed during this session, and of course during all the sessions during the Sustainability Week. That week, as we mentioned, is really a 5-day event that aims to discuss all these topics across 8 different webinars, and also to bring all the industry stakeholders together with suppliers, potential partners in the sustainable world, suppliers of alternatives to single-use packaging, alternatives for plastic water bottles, and so on and so forth, and many other sustainable services. So it's a networking and webinar event, and of course, as you probably have seen, it is free of charge. So do come and register and sign on if you are available that week. And I'm just going to share very briefly I think it's changed there. You can see on the agenda of travelretailsustainabilityweek.com, we've got a jam-packed program with a keynote session there, full of really interesting sessions dealing with sustainability from all different angles. David Katz from the Plastic Bank, people you'll already know, Anson Bailey from KPMG. We've got a beauty sessions focusing specifically on sustainability in the fragrance, skincare and cosmetics sector, with different leaders there in that category, including the French Fragrance Foundation. We've got a session looking at Lead by Example is going to be looking at sustainable investments from leading companies across the industry, from all different perspectives. We've got a session specifically on the solutions providers. What are NGOs doing to clean up the oceans, to educate people in developing countries where there is a huge problem with plastic pollution? And how can you as stakeholders, how can we as an industry help those organizations? And so there's really interesting presentations in that particular session there. And discussions. We've got one session on partnerships. How are airports and retailers and brands and other stakeholders working together to forge powerful new partnerships to address sustainability? And Beyond Plastics is going to look at the sustainability topic from different angles. From a regional perspective, we'll be having insights from countries from Finland to the Middle East to the Americas to understand the consumer mindset in all these countries. And also to talk beyond plastics, look at different topics like regenerative farming and what else sustainability entails in a business. And of course, a consumer insight session with different perspectives from the beauty sector, from the travel sector, travel retail, from mindset, and the Plant-Based Products Council's insights on what are consumers saying about the use of products that are not single-use plastics, but plant-based products. So we're going to go back to the other presentation now. And there we go. So you've got a full agenda there, and we really hope you'll be able to join us during that week. As I mentioned, it is free of charge, both for the networking and the webinar, so do please come along. And we can't mention the Sustainability Week without showing the dates, 19th to 23rd of April, and of course, all our generous sponsors and partners who are supporting that event and enabling us to make it free of charge for all of you. So I'm now going to hand back to Luke, but just briefly before I do, please do send in your questions. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for our speakers today. So please do use the Q&A function and we'll address those throughout the session. Thanks. Over to you, Luke.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, so we've got a lot of content to cover today. So to kick things off, I'd like to begin by asking each of our panelists to briefly outline some of their current sustainability focuses, and crucially, whether these have sharpened since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to begin by asking Jill that question. Jill, do you want to kick things off?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Luke. Thanks for having me on the panel. At this point, do you want me to go into the slides that we've prepared or just speak more broadly?
By all means, Jill, yeah, if you'd like to illustrate some of your points with the slides.
Okay, great. So I think what might be helpful is just to talk about sustainability overall in terms of virgin voyages and how we think about it. It's really embedded into our business. And at the core of our business is our purpose statement, which is to create an epic sea change for all. And we've defined what this looks like according to 5 key stakeholder pillars. What does an epic sea change look like when we look at our oceans as a stakeholder? So we've reduced single-use plastics and we've eliminated it from our experience on board, for example. We've looked at what does an epic sea change look like for our communities, for our customers on board, who we call our sailors, for our crew, and for our partners, because we realize that to create an epic sea change, which in a nutshell is really about creating positive change for people and the planet, that we can't do this alone. We need to partner with like-minded organizations, with brands that also communicate our story and our purpose for creating positive change. And that's why it's important for us to have partners like Harding on board who are curating that unique brand experience for us on board, so that our sailors, as they are going about their journey with us, are interacting with brands that tell a little bit about who we are, and we think also reflect what our sailors care about. So some of the commitments that we've made, as I mentioned, we've banned single-use plastics from the sailor experience, and we've taken action on climate change. We really work to kind of embed subtly all these different sustainability principles in a way, we call it guilt-free indulgence for our sailors, that they don't have to worry about making a sustainable choice on board. We've made it very easy for them to do that. And that's true, again, of the partners that we work with. So we've made some really, I think, interesting choices in terms of the brands that we carry on board. And I know Mark will go into a little bit more detail into what that looks like. But just one quick example, we have these beautiful red hammocks on board. Every balcony cabin has a beautiful hammock, and it's made from artisans in Thailand, and they've written their name on each hammock, and it's a social enterprise that we're supporting, and we're really proud to be doing that. So that's just one example of how we've worked to be very selective about the brands that we work with throughout designing the sailor experience. And we remain committed to that. So we've been on pause during this COVID time. Obviously, we're not in operation right now. We were just getting ready to launch when COVID hit. But all of our commitments remain intact in terms of no single-use plastics, sustainable partnerships, taking action on climate change. We're not rolling back any of that. In fact, if anything, we're just making those commitments stronger moving forward.
Thanks, Jill. I particularly like your reference there to the epic sea change. I'm sure that's something people can very much engage with. And indeed, you're leading Virgin Voyages Changing Business for Good strategy. How do you ensure that the wider social impacts of what you're doing as a business on climate change, preserving ocean health, are considered in the decision-making process? Where does that sort of start?
Yeah, well, fortunately for us, we created everything from scratch, and we started the business from day one with that purpose statement. And so it was really baked into the DNA of what we were trying to create. And so our purpose statement and how we defined what an epic sea change looks like for each one of our kind of core stakeholder groups, we mapped out what does that look like. And so it was there from the very beginning, and it continues to be our compass when we're making decisions as a company. So we kind of have that advantage that it's not like we had to do away with anything that wasn't ideal. And a lot of brands are in that position that, they're kind of trying to change the way that they've done things. We just mapped it out from the beginning and said, what would a sea change look like, and started from that space.
And now let's bring Mark in at this point. In terms of the reference to epic sea change, what does that look like for Harding right now in terms of the way you're shaping your sustainability strategy on the seas, and crucially in the relationships that you have with your partners? What are you demanding, and what are the expectations really in terms of listings and obviously negotiating this turbulent period?
Thank you, Luke. I think, probably just to set the scene a little bit, Jill is our partner at Virgin Voyages. For Harding, we currently operate on when they're back in the water, 60 cruise ships globally, variety of different regions, locations, variety of different shapes and sizes. But when the Virgin proposition came along, it was markedly different from the very start. So maybe I think if it's useful to give you a bit of background in terms of the journey that we've been on with Virgin and bring it up to date with where it is today, and then also how that's in particular influenced Harding's view on sustainability. I think that part of it is quite key. So, the journey started back in 2017. As I say, things were very different from the start. There was a very clear brief from Virgin that the retail, first of all, had to integrate seamlessly into the overall Virgin proposition. And it was viewed as a really critical touch point in the sailor experience. And so Virgin referred to their guests as sailors. So the retail space was then designed to showcase the brands and stories that really engaged and got sailors engaged and talking about the Virgin brand by bringing, for us, new, unexpected, unique and sustainable ranges at sea, many of which would be there for the very first time. They had never been seen before. So in order to frame that, though, there was some really detailed insight from Virgin, which kind of set the roadmap out in developing the retail experience. And the sustainable element was a crucial component for Virgin, essentially for us, guilt-free indulgence. So this then rippled into the details of retail from Harding's perspective. And we were really entering into a new space that I guess is currently heavily dominated by known brands within the travel retail marketplace and assortments, and probably retailers, including ourselves at the time, that only probably had a subtle, if any, nod to the environment or sustainable practices from a retail standpoint. So the lens that we had to look through when we were putting the proposition together for Virgin had changed. The Harding team, they had to do some pretty extensive research, both individually and then within their supply base. Conversations were very different. They took a different turn than what they'd done in the past with previous vendors. We were then going through a vetting process that we partnered with Virgin on, where we looked at the vendor's credentials from an environmental and a human rights sourcing criteria. And some of those vendors didn't make it through that checkpoint. I'm pleased to say the majority did, but again, these were different types of conversations that we're having with vendors and brands. And the interesting point was that when we started the dialogue off with them, they also were completely engaged. And so we had them kind of on the same journey and the same path with us from the very start. I think then, I guess, to kind of summarize where it all landed, and I'll go into a little bit detail about the brands shortly. The overall proposition that we've got on Virgin now today, we've got in total, I think it's over 271 brands that are in part of the assortment. 70% of them are either new or have never been to sea before, but critically, 25% of them have a commitment to social or environmental impact, and 5 of them are also B Corp brands. Now, that marked a significant step change, certainly from a retail perspective and a cruise retail perspective. We were less than 1% that fitted that criteria before the experience that we developed with Virgin. So I think then on top of that, you touched on this earlier, Luke, in your introduction, in particular what's happened in the last 12 months from COVID perspective. And I think there's been a marked shift in consumer behavior in retail, from changing from bricks and mortar to moving to an online shop, or to a more heightened awareness really of where a product is sourced from, how it was made and its impact to the environment. Those considerations now are very much high on the list for people's purchasing patterns and purchasing behaviors. And it's of equal importance, or it's getting to equal importance, of whether it's price, promotion, or equally where it's sourced from. So I think what we are about to deliver on Virgin, as Jill touched on, we are about to sail, hopefully in the next few weeks for the very first time. We're very, very well placed to be almost ahead of that curve. So what did that produce on board? So I think it's worth pointing out from a branding, ranging, assortment standpoint, we, as well as doing everything different with Virgin, we also had to come up with a different business and commercial model. The existing one that's within cruise per se doesn't really support this 100% customer-centric approach. And so we did change the operating model with Virgin in order to bring these brands and ranges to sea, which has allowed us the flexibility to do what we do today. So just to give you a little bit of insight of some of the stories that are on board today. So the picture you see there, bottom right, Georganics. So I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but we used to sell somewhere in the region of 35,000 plastic toothbrushes a year at Harding across our real estate. G Organics produce a toothbrush that's made from eco-friendly bamboo, and it has a marginal, when we're saying marginal, it cents cost difference to the plastic one. But just moving to that type of product supply or product supportment is such a significant step. They provide oral health care it's stuff that isn't just good for you, but they are also good for the planet, and it uses ingredients that are from pure and from natural organic sources. So these touches that start to appear then in the retail space then link back or tie back nicely then into the overall Virgin approach as far as sustainability is concerned. Stream to sea. So wherever the ships sail, generally they want to follow the sun. So sunscreen is a really important element in terms of the product range and assortment that we have on board. So stream to sea, creates mineral-based sun products for the face and body. It's proven safe then for marine fish and coral, and is then also supplied and housed in completely sustainable packaging. Norton Point that you see at the top right there, the sunglasses, looks like sunglasses at the first look, but those sunglasses are actually made from upcycled ocean plastic products. So a portion of their profits from every sale are then reinvested into research, education, and development of stemming the ocean from the impacts of plastic into the future. Sea bags, which you see there up on the top right there, is under a similar theme. So those marine-inspired tote bags are all made from recycled sails. So you can kind of see the theme and story that's starting to resonate through each of these areas. And you can imagine then, without physically showing the retail space, that at each touch point you go within each of the stores, there is a story to tell within each of the retail spaces and each of the retail environments. And finally, on the slide there, top left, you have the Virgin brand area. Obviously, anything that's carrying the Virgin brand or the Scarlet Lady name has to have, it actually went through extra vetting credentials in terms of the supply base that we were using, but also complete focus then from Virgin in what types of materials, the cotton that we were using in the t-shirts, how we did the vendor selection. That's resulted then in several firsts in the apparel range where we've used recycled cotton. We have champagne flutes on board that have been made from recycled glass, and even a backpack that's been made from vegan leather, all completely first at sea. So I think that hopes to give you a little bit of setting the scene of how the product assortment has changed. And, as I mentioned earlier, that 25% of the assortment that has that eco-sustainable or environmental message there is pretty key. And it's something that you won't see at sea before. A couple of others I'll just call out quite quickly. Apollos, which is the bag. Actually, I think it's probably hidden currently on my slide at the moment. That is one of the bags that's produced by the Bangladeshi project by the Indians. And that every single bag that is made by the Bangladesh product, part of those proceeds go back and reinvested into that area and into that zone. Probably worth talking about the B Corps that we have on board. So for those that might not know, there's around about 3,500 B Corp brands globally. They are generally the businesses that demonstrate the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance. They have complete public transparency and legal accountability then to balance between profit and purpose. And Apollos Bags is a great example of that.
Thanks,
Mark, you mentioned the bags made from recycled cells, but what about the actual duty-free shopping bags that you put the liquor and so on in? What are you doing for that?
Yeah, so we have moved away from the packaging side of it on board most of our ships now. It's been replaced with a woven polypropylene bag that's completely eco-friendly. That will be used then for housing any purchases, but the way it's being designed for the future is that it'll have a notional cost to it, either $1 or £1 or something to that extent, but we will be encouraging people actually not to use the bags and just to take the purchase with them, is what you will find in normal stores today. I think our other challenge in the area has been in particular around about liquor boxes. So if you imagine on board, generally people buy 2-3 bottles of liquor boxes and you have to stack them into the boxes. And so we're looking at alternative methods and solutions for that. Some of these polypropylene bags have also been developed to try and combat that. So we're on the route to that. We haven't got to the very end of that journey, but it's certainly in progress. We have developed also then an eco-friendly bag that will be used specifically and exclusively on Virgin.
So can you just explain for the layman that might not understand the technical terms, what the polypropylene bag entails, whether it's biodegradable, whether it's compostable, whether it's recycled or recyclable?
Yeah, so they are reusable, recyclable. They're made from recyclable products. They have a very low cost. They have a very low resource use in terms of producing them. Guests are probably more likely to buy that bag than any other kind of bag. If you think about as a kind of standard tote bag that you might see within a supermarket or one of the retail spaces today, that's generally, if it's a recycled bag, the material that it's made from.
And I imagine a lot of retailers now today, cruise, airport, airline, are looking at how they can replace the traditional plastic bag with a more environmentally friendly solution. But obviously, there's a cost to that. We're talking about the cost of going green. Is that a significant increase in the cost per unit?
Good question, Michael. I think the straight answer in terms of the cost of the type of products we're talking about, yes, it is more cost prohibitive than what you would do from a normal traditional plastic or paper bag. However, if you're going down the route that we are trying to do, which is actually you're giving out the use of those plastic bags much less and encouraging people not to take the bags, the cost eventually should balance itself out, and actually it should become cost less if people get into the mindset of not using bags. And if you think about what happens today here within the UK market, it's very rarely you go into a shop, whether it's a supermarket or a retailer today, without some form of a bag already in your hand. And that's the type of kind of cultural mentality or approach that you want to achieve also at sea. People either come in with the bag or they'll take the product without the bag. I think the only probably exceptions that I might call out is when you're up in the premium end product with the likes of, I don't know if there's somebody buys a Bulgari watch or a Tag watch, where the packaging is almost part of the purchase experience, a little bit more challenging to do it in that area currently, although there are things that are being looked at within that area. But anything else, we're kind of trying to discourage the use of either giving out the plastic bags or people using them on a frequent basis.
There's an interesting segue into to ask Cheryl about what they're doing with bags and how their retail partners are approaching it. But before we do move to Cheryl, I think we mentioned this when we discussed earlier this week. It must be a fantastic story for the brand ambassadors on board in the shops to engage with the sailors and talk about these products. You talk about the importance of staff interaction in the shop in terms of converting browsers into shoppers, and the research shows that the staff interaction is really important. Product knowledge is obviously vital there, but the story about the sustainably sourced toothbrush or whatever it might be must be a really good engagement factor for the staff. Isn't that right?
It's for cruise retail, Michael, it's honestly the things that dreams are made of, because we're fortunate in that we have time on our side. So if you think the average cruise duration is between 6 to 7 days, so you have those people in that environment for that extended period of time. And so where you have a brand, a product or a range that has a story to tell, it's the perfect environment to be able to do it. And the kind of cruise retail environment harnesses those relationships where you'll have a guest that will walk through the door on day one. You'll greet them on day one. Day two, they'll come back. How was your day ashore? What did you get up to? It's not a kind of high-pressured sales environment. Don't get me wrong, we need to produce revenues. However, it's not that kind of cut and thrust type approach. And so harnessing those relationships then gives the staff the opportunity to be able to tell those stories and convey those messages. I think it's a really critical component, I think, on the retail side, in that you can have the brilliant looking stores and have the product assortments there, but if you haven't got the people to tell the story about those brands, it's not going to succeed. And so the retail teams are really the linchpin to be able to take the product, tell the story, get the people engaged in it. And listen, when people make those purchases, they get a feeling then that they've either, had a little bit of education on what it is that they're buying. They feel a little bit more conscious about the purchase that they've made, and maybe a little bit of good that they've done as a result of making that purchase. And through the story that the staff are able to tell, they probably potentially would never have made that purchase or discovered that brand in the future. And then how that impacts, their shopping behaviors in the future, I think is key. But yes, for the staff, it is a dream scenario when you have all these incredible stories to be able to tell.
Yeah, and I think it's a unique opportunity when you see that, the Chinese, for example, are always looking for something unique to take back home, where, the friends and colleagues haven't been able to, cannot get that back home in China. So, these new sustainable purchase options are, I think, a fantastic opportunity to seduce these kind of consumers who want that unique opportunity, product.
And just continuing that point, Mark, you mentioned there about sustainable B Corp brands. Obviously, we're well aware that they're gaining importance, and there's more of a consumer recognition for these types of products. I mean, how applicable do you view the physical retail domain for dedicated certified B Corp brands? Is there an argument that on a channel basis, be it cruise, they would work particularly well, but importantly, in terms of the physical merchandising of those products, would that work better, do you feel, than online? What are you sort of seeing in terms of the appetite for those sort of brands?
I think the appetite is definitely growing, Luke. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's been accelerated in the last 12 months to where it was prior to COVID, but even prior to COVID, I think the desire in terms of making a more responsible purchase was already there in a lot of consumers' mindsets. I think from a harding perspective, Virgin's probably the furthest that we've gone thus far, and there are elements of it that we still need to test and trial and evaluate and see actually what the responses to those kind of approaches has been. I think overall, though, it's become, an important part and component of any assortment across any retail space that we're dealing with today, and I think it will continue to grow into the future. I think it's an area where you will definitely have to carve out space for, and it's an approach where you have to carve out space for. I just can't see that the future would be there without it.
Thanks, Mark. I'd like to bring Andy in at this point to ask for his view on that. Demand for certified B Corp products. Is this something that Brown-Forman is looking at? Can you talk a little bit about the importance of these, but more importantly, talk about and update us rather on specific areas that the Brown-Forman are investing in at the moment? I know that you've recently updated your sustainability strategy. Can you shed a bit more light on that?
Sure. Thanks, Luke. So at Brown-Forman, we've actually just completed kind of our review and are getting ready to launch our third version of our sustainability strategy. And for us, it really has been an evolution over time and the learning journey of how we progressed as a company. For Brown-Forman, because of the work that we do, we rely on clean water, high quality grains and other agricultural products, and white oak for our barrels. I mean, we're directly connected to nature in a very special way, and that's been an important bedrock for our company for the over 150 years that we've been in business. So for us in this learning journey, we've been moving from where we have direct impacts on our our production operations, our owned operations, moving now into where can we interact with our key partners in the supply chain, because we do recognize that there isn't any one company that can fix some of these larger environmental and social issues by themselves. We have to do this together, and so building those partnerships across the supply chain, having those long-term key partnerships in areas like packaging supply or retail environment are really important to us as we start to look about how we can continue to make a difference and make our contribution to the global environment. We've spent time more recently ensuring that as we look at our sustainability targets, that they're science-based, so that we're listening to what science is telling us in terms of what changes have to be made, making sure that we're aligning ourselves with global targets. So ensuring that we're aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. Again, making sure that we're contributing in our way to solving the larger problem. And in a case like travel retail, for us, that tends to focus more on the packaging. And so as we look to more formally communicate our new sustainability targets, we will be talking about sustainable packaging targets for the first time. So how do we make sure that we're incorporating more recycled content into the packaging that we provide? How do we work with our customers, the retailers, and make sure that we can present the product in a way that reduces impact on the environment, is still aesthetically pleasing to our end consumers, and does it in a way that still protects the product. If you have a packaging that doesn't protect the product or doesn't protect the consumer, then it's not a good packaging, regardless of its sustainability credentials. So for us, it's balancing all of those items together and really working directly with key customers and suppliers to make that work.
And how tough has it been, Andy, to, I guess, strike the right balance between investing in innovative products that are sustainable but ultimately carry a cost versus existing SKU assortments where you may have a particularly loyal or popular consumer base? Has that been a challenge, particularly in the last 12 months or certainly since the pandemic began, as you're working through your sustainability strategy?
Yeah, it certainly can be a challenge to look at those types of trade-offs, especially when you're talking about a premium or super premium brand experience, where you're hoping to present the product in a aesthetically pleasing way that helps show the value of the product to the end consumer. But what I will say is we have had a lot of feedback from our customers, because again, we contribute to the environmental impact of our retail partners. And so as they're looking to achieve their goals, they're going to turn to folks like us, the brand owners, to help them achieve their goals. And for us, primarily our packaging is around glass bottles. I mean, that's the primary media that we use. We do have some plastics, we do have some aluminum or other materials. But our primary way of working with that is working directly with our packaging suppliers. So partnering with those long-term suppliers, seeing what we can do to improve the technology, test out new materials or inclusion of additional recycled content. And then additionally, I think the other challenges, and I know it's been mentioned about just general consumer behavior of, when you talk about something like increasing recycled content, you have to have a way to get the material back. So, when the products go out in a packaging, if we're going to incorporate recycled content into our bottles going forward, we have to get that packaging back. So working with our partners to understand how we can close those material loops, that's probably one of the larger challenges, because again, it does require or does count on some level of consumer behavior change. I mean, a consumer has to take and put the package back into a system where it can be recovered. And if that's not convenient or it's a change, then that takes time to make those changes.
But also, Andy, the consumer angle, as Mark was saying, is since COVID in particular, consumers become more and more discerning about sustainable purchases and socially conscious, socially responsible businesses and so on, and are walking with their conscience and purchasing with their conscience more and more. How do you, as a brand owner, communicate those sustainable values to your consumers, and how are you gauging their feedback on what you're doing? Is it through the, not just the packaging, but also everything that's behind there with the partnerships, the energy initiatives that you've been working on for cleaner, greener energy and so on? How is that all communicated to the consumer?
Yeah, sure. So we work on a number of different opportunities for doing that communication. So I know I've heard the term brand ambassador mentioned. So as our sales teams go out, we make sure that they are provided with that key information on what is it that we're doing in the places where we produce our product, because our brands are produced in specific locations. We only produce Jack Daniel's in Lynchburg, Tennessee. It's not made anywhere else. So we tell the stories about what are we doing in the environmental space, in the community, from a diversity and inclusion lens in those places. And so our brand teams can then go and talk with customers and talk with consumers about what are those real actions that we're taking. In other opportunities, we'll take advantage of social media platforms, and we'll tell our story and talk about the example you mentioned about the power purchase agreement we made with East Fork Wind out in Shelby, Kansas, and the importance of that partnership to us in terms of driving down our emissions from electricity. And so taking those examples, we've worked with companies to do videos that we can share on our social media platforms that help consumers start to understand more about how we work within the environment to make sure that we are, reducing any negative impacts and that we're helping regenerate our local environment. And so those are probably the main ways that we do that work.
We've seen in COVID, obviously, contact tracing via QR codes where you have to check in to check in, check out to show where you've been. So it's become from all age groups. Seniors have to go through that as well. And so everybody more or less is now familiar with the QR code technology and obtaining information through QR code. Is that something also you'd be looking at or are already looking at on the packaging?
Yeah, we've got some great technology teams that are doing all sorts of interesting stuff. And a QR code is certainly one. But I know that some of our brands have invested in what's called augmented reality technology. So there's actually an AR app for a Jack Daniel's brand that if a consumer downloads that and has that on their smartphone, if they hold their smartphone camera with that app open in front of a Jack Daniel's bottle, the label actually will come to life, and it will tell some of the story of how is Jack Daniel's produced, and tell you a little bit about the history of Jack Daniel's himself and the company and how it's grown over the years. So there are those tools that allow us to do that kind of one-on-one. The technology, of course, is always changing, so there's always something out there, and so we're fortunate to have a very good innovation team that is always looking into those and trying those items out.
It presents an opportunity to present all that sustainable story. Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
You mentioned the East Fork Wind project, and I think your Chief Sustainability Officer, Alex Alvarez, was mentioning that that's enabled you to offset 90% of your greenhouse gases in the video you submitted for the sustainability pitch. Is that does that represent a sort of an investment, or is that actually not just environmentally friendly, but also financially friendly as well?
Yeah, so that is going to allow us to offset almost all of our U.S.-based electricity emissions, and it's really been a great partnership. For us, that's a power purchase agreement, so it's essentially a purchasing contract. But the East Fork Wind was a brand new development, and it was great for us alongside a couple of other larger corporations who made the commitments to purchase that power. It was really that group of companies that allowed that development to be built. And so while we didn't necessarily put any capital investment into that, our commitment to a 15-year purchase contract allows that developer to be able to invest that money and know that they're going to get a return. And it has been up in operation for 12 months now for us, producing about as much electricity as we expected it to. And to this point, it's actually been cost neutral for us. And obviously the power market goes up and down, and there's different forces at work in the U.S. electric grid. But for us, this has been basically a cost neutral move that's allowed us to reduce almost all of our electricity emissions. And it's been a great investment for us.
It's great to hear. It's not always a more costly endeavor to go green.
I'd like to bring in Cheryl at this point. Cheryl's been waiting patiently. Obviously, Cheryl, San Francisco Airport launched its zero waste to landfill goal a few years ago. Can you update us on those actions, what you've taken to achieve this, what are you taking to achieve this, and crucially, what are your concessionaires and tenants doing to help you support this goal?
Thank you. Good day, everyone. So along our goals for zero waste, what we've asked the concessionaires to do is a number of things. And it started almost 10 years ago. 9 years ago, we banned the use of single-use plastic bags, and a bag charge was instituted for those instances where a bag was just completely necessary. In 2016, we had no more polystyrene foam foodware that we allowed. And some of these were SFO initiatives, and some of them were county and city government initiatives. In 2018, we banned plastic straws. We spent a lot of time ensuring that all the foodwares, all the to-go-ware was compostable to the greatest extent possible. You know, we had to be practical as well. There was a time when it was very difficult to find a compostable container for steaming hot soup, for instance, that wouldn't break down. But the tenants partnered with us. In 2019, we banned the sale of single-use plastic bottles of water. And about a week ago, we banned all plastic bottles for beverages. We found that 30% of our waste was food, foodware, and beverage bottles. So far, in the last couple of years, we have reduced, we've gone down to about 50 to 60% diversion away from the landfills. Obviously, we want to get to zero waste, and this is an important initiative. We think that we are saving 4 million plastic bottles from entering the waste stream just at SFO. And I'd like to say that our partners, we don't actually sell anything. I'm really intrigued by everything I've heard so far today and inspired. We're an airport. We're not a retail business owner or service or, food and beverage owner. We're just an engaged and progressive, I hope, landlord that works in partnership and tries to inspire our tenants. And I'll tell you, it's not as difficult as I expected. And some folks within the airport, different, certainly not the sustainability staff, but maybe on the business side, there's some hand wringing every time we want to roll out a new initiative. Oh my goodness, this is going to be very difficult. This is going to cut into their P&L. And then we mandate it, and we just say, these are our values, and our values are in sync with the values of the region we live in. So it's not outrageous. It's who we are in California, and who we are in many other places as well. And our tenants get on board and make it happen with us. We've seen very little fall off in sales. We're not that familiar in what the fall off in margin has been, but we have not had a protest, or a significant outcry from our business owners over these initiatives. So we're going to keep going. And although, the sale of water in an airport is huge, we'd like to eliminate it to the extent that we can, or cut back on it. We have put hydration stations, which are not water fountains. They're much more than that. All over our airport, they have hot and cold and ambient temperature water, and we're really trying to encourage and message to bring reusable bottles with you on your trip, and we see more and more of it. While we're in the hospitality industry, we're also environmental stewards. All of us are.
That's an important point, because for some retailers, water is a huge revenue generator. So are you looking at solutions to regenerate revenues through water sales, or refillable sales, or distributors with mineral water and flavored water and so on? Or is it your plan just to offer it free of charge now for passengers?
Our hydration stations, which you have to use your own bottle for, are free. The tenants have found, and we've helped them with this, that they can still sell water in glass and in aluminum, and in fact they can brand it if they want. And the aluminum bottles are reusable, and we're encouraging them to sell reusable bottles, which of course is a higher ticket item at their concessions. We're helping them with graphics and messaging. And I think as we develop future concessions, I would like to get away somewhat from all this carry out food. This is we're in the hospitality business, and this is, maybe going back in time somewhat. I know it's convenient. We've gotten used to convenience, but I personally think it's an abomination to eat your meal from your lap in a hold room or somewhere. I would like us to serve our guests and wash our dishes and just have a offer civilized and personal and calm options for eating and dining with us. Many years ago, I went to Mexico. It was probably 18 years ago or something like that, my first time to a surf camp. And while there, one of the very first messages we were given was sit down and eat, go into the restaurants, don't carry your food away. We don't want to create more waste. And I've never forgotten that. At the time I thought, oh, I've never heard of anything like that. I'm used to eating behind my steering wheel or something. But I think, we'll always be a hospitality and service industry. And I think we can interwove that with cutting down on waste quite well. I think they're compatible.
On that topic, you see in certain airports now there's a solution where the I think it's the Cup Club, I think is one that they're working on in the UK somewhere, where it's a closed loop environment where the coffee cups, for example, are washed and recycled. Is that something that you're looking at or already doing in San Francisco?
We are not doing that yet in San Francisco. I don't know. I don't think we will do that beyond what I just kind of discussed, and which is doing more developments where people can come in and sit down and have a complete experience rather than just walk away with paper and with bags.
Because there's a lot of investment by the coffee houses, the cafes in biodegradables, compostable cups and lids and so on. But then whether it's downtown or in an airport, there's no infrastructure really to recycle. Here in Australia, I've just seen only one coffee shop which has a bin where you can actually recycle your biodegradable or compostable coffee cup. There's nowhere, and the councils don't put that into place. Is that something, if your tenant, the F&B tenants, are investing into compostables, is that something that you as an airport are or looking to provide bins that passengers can put their compostable cups in for compost?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we want to take the guesswork out of this for our guests and just require all to-go ware, lids, sleeves, cups, forks, knives, everything to be compostable. And it's more challenging than I would think, honestly, to educate the public about what they have in their hands and which trash bin it should go in. But we would like everything to be compostable and just take away the guessing game and have a positive effect on our zero waste goals. It's difficult. I hope this isn't a cop out in any way, but I think it's really difficult when our market is 28 million people per year. It's the scale is so different than a local coffee house in terms of a cup club or so on. So we've really got to rely on changing some habits. We can do that with water, for instance, but not not so much coffee. But we can mandate and help the tenants find product that's compostable.
What are your retail partners doing for the plastic bags, the shopping bags, or how they replaced the duty-free bags?
So we have we have paper bags all around the airport. We do have a bag charge, and we have staff that is asking, like probably many other places, do you need a bag? I mean, we're trying not to give out bags, but we still do have reusable, recyclable bags in our duty-free operation.
Okay. And you said earlier on you were inspired by what you heard from some of the other presentations. If you go back to what Jill and Mark were saying about the offer that they have on board with B Corp brands and brands supplied from NGOs, social enterprises, and so on. Is that something that you as an airport would look to now work on with your retailer partners and encourage them to go down that road and source more sustainably sourced and environmentally friendly products?
Yes, we will absolutely work on that. In fact, our sustainability director at the airport is a very energetic and impressive and forward-thinking young woman, and she's already been talking to my boss and I about this. And I have to tell you, I'm the business person, not the sustainability person. She has to, bring me along, but I trust her entirely. And she's out ahead and challenging us. So, I want to be a good partner with her and, with the environment overall. It's a team that delivers this sort of thing.
And taking that a step further, because you're on the business side, some airports and we've been discussing with over recent weeks, and it's been a fascinating journey for us, the whole team, in recent months, talking to stakeholders all over the world from all categories and sectors about their different sustainability journeys, and we're learning a lot along the way. And listening to some airports, there's a desire to move towards where an RFP model, a tender model, where there are certain sustainability benchmarks in there, where the retailer partners, but also brand partners, would have to tick certain boxes to meet certain sustainability criteria. Is that something you're also looking at?
We're absolutely looking at that, and that's where it's got to start. We've got to let tenants know, or prospective tenants know early on, what it is we want, so they can deliver it. And they want that information. They desperately want to know, how do I please SFO? How do I win in an RFP process? So we've already looked at our evaluation criteria, and rather than adding a lot new, we're saying, what can we winnow down? What's really not necessary to have in there any longer, because we want to replace it with sustainability efforts. And we want to see in proposals a response to whatever it is, 5 points, 12 points, whatever it is, environmental stewardship and sustainability goals. We want them to be able to compete and win partially on that basis.
Sure. Are you at the stage where that's becoming a prerequisite of a bid submission and a condition that is inked into those contracts? Are you at that point yet, or is it a case of you are asking as the landlord, as you say, a certain number of points or targets that the companies have to meet? Where are we at this point? Is it a demand? Do they have to meet these as a condition of their applications?
It's not a minimum qualification yet to be, for instance, I heard about B Corps or to have some kind of certification. It's not a requirement yet. The way we would handle this is the way we've had a 16-point sustainable food program for many years. And the way we've handled it is a qualitative review of how they're going to meet our requirements, and that the folks scoring the proposals can decide how well they think prospective tenants have responded to each thing we've asked them for.
So I'd like to ask that question to Mark, actually, on the retailer side. Mark, is this something that you're seeing more and more in terms of when you're bidding for vessel contracts? Are there certain conditions built in, or maybe not conditions, but suggestions that could mean that vessels look favourably on your bids? What's your perspective on that side?
There are definitely elements of it starting to creep in some of those RFP processes, probably in the last couple of years. I think outside of the RFP process, the Virgin one specifically, which I touched on a little bit earlier, it was very explicit from the start, part of the RFP for a second, that actually, if you're going to be part of the Virgin proposition, then the sustainability story has to be part of the assortment. It wasn't a negotiation. That was part of the story. It was the part of the Virgin DNA. It was who they were about, and the retail part of it then had to resonate and match to that. But I think, to your point, Luke, there are more questions being asked in RFPs or in contract negotiations around sustainability, around just sustainability policy, and particularly what you can deliver from a product standpoint in that arena. And I think we will see that increase now over the coming years. I think it's going to become part and parcel of most RFP negotiations. Where it ranks in terms of its level of importance, question mark, and I think that will be dependent on the cruise brand and who's asking that question and where it sits in their priorities. But I think, give it a couple of years, it's going to be a standard requirement.
Interesting.
And rightly so, it should be.
We've got some questions coming in, Michael.
Yeah.
Got a few coming in. Staying with yourself, actually, Mark, Harding was announced today a new 5-year expanded contract with P&O and Gunnar. Put you on the spot a little bit here. But in terms of that contract, how will Harding look to evolve its sustainability strategy across both fleets? I mean, it's quite a broad-ranging question, but perhaps there are certain elements that are already at play here with those vessels. Maybe you can touch on some of those.
Yeah, look, I think that there's lots of commonality, I think, in terms of what people are trying to achieve from in the cruise perspective, whether it's all cruise brands moving to single-use plastics, and or if they're moving to removal of all bags, packaging. There are some common themes there, and I think, as I mentioned a second ago, it's at varying levels on people's agenda right now. I think where we are seeing more of a move to that requirement is anything that incorporates the cruise line's brand, logo, the ship's name, or anything that's got their kind of presence on it. That tends to be the area where they're shining a light or asking the questions about, well, what is the type of product that you're using there? Is it recyclable material? Is it something that we want our brand to be associated with? It's probably moving more in that arena with the rest of the cruise lines currently. We haven't had the requirement to the extent of what we've done, certainly with Virgin, not to this point anyway. I don't think we will get to that level, or I don't foresee us getting to that level for some time. And as I mentioned earlier, the Virgin proposition, I think, as well as the sustainability side, they had a clear view and vision about who their sailor was. Now, that sailor is a marked different sailor to who you see in the traditional cruise market today. And therefore, everything that we've done around that has been based on the fact that this new sailor is going to be on board. And, they are younger, as you've probably seen, the ships are adults only, the kind of highest age range is anticipated to be around about 45, whereas you think of average cruises around about 65. So I guess the uniqueness of Virgin is that consumer and that proposition is very much targeted to who is going to be on board. Whereas if you lifted that, I'm not suggesting we're going to do this, Jill. If you lifted that and dropped it on another cruise line, it simply wouldn't work because the consumer isn't there to respond to it.
Mm-hmm. We've got a question for both yourself, Mark, and Jill. It seems to be a bit of a common theme coming through in the questions. Have you detected as yet any age or gender bias among your cruise or shop customers towards biorecyclable products, and how much will you be promoting the guilt-free indulgence message in your duty-free stores? Perhaps, Mark, we'll start with yourself there, and then get your perspective on the cruise side.
Sure. Certainly from our perspective, the awareness of it seems to be in the mid to upper age brackets, and by that I would say 25 to 45. That generally tends to be where the heightened awareness is at the moment, and that is, I think, across all of our cruise brands, I would say the same thing. It tends to be within that age bracket where that consideration is there. I think, would we promote guilt-free indulgence? Yes, but in a sustainable way. It's a sustainable story that we're going to tell on Virgin, and the story about those brands that, that's the message the key message that we have to get across, and that's the message that we want to get across. We want to tell people about these exciting products that we've got, where they've been sourced from, how they've been made, what the story is behind them. That's the bit that's going to engage the consumer along the journey. And, I worked on the project from day one back in 2016, 17, and, I'm still itching today to get the doors open for the very first time and have that consumer on board and to see the response that we're going to get, because we think it's going to be phenomenal. But I'm going to be a bit more patient and wait a couple more months. So maybe if we do this time next year, I'll be telling a different story, and Jill and I will be off, hopefully retired somewhere and lapping up all the proceeds. I'm kidding. But yes, I think it's going to be, I think it's a really exciting position that we've got to with Virgin. It's a super exciting proposition that we've got there. We just can't wait to get the doors open and get those sailors on board and see how they respond to it.
Jill, do you want to add any follow-up comments to that?
I mean, I think Mark covered it. The fact is we're not operational yet. So we really, we think we know what the response is going to be, but we don't know until we're actually sailing. But we know that all these commitments is just a start. So when we talk about guilt-free indulgence, there's the story component, which is so important because it tells part of our story as a brand. But also we have woven sustainability into all aspects of the experience on board the ship, and we don't necessarily shout about it. We like to surprise and delight, as we call it. So it's like, you look at your coffee cup, for example. We do have a to-go coffee cup, but it's made from compostable byproducts, like agricultural waste. There's no trees involved. And there's just a little message at the very bottom of the cup that says, there's no trees in this cup. And it's like, oh, that's interesting, right? So we try to pique some curiosity along the way and educate sailors in the process. And again, through that, tell the story so that our sailors don't have to worry about it. They just know that we're doing the right thing.
And hopefully one day we'll get to, in not too distant future, a scenario where everybody, as soon as they get around the table, looking at the future partnerships, sustainability will be high on the agenda, if not top of the agenda. But at the moment, I want to ask this to all of you, and probably in a kind of as a summary question to wrap up, because I'm conscious of time and we don't want to overstay our welcome. As I said, some of the Americans have kindly hosted us here, so we need to wrap up fairly soon. But it will be interesting to hear from all of you. Who's driving who in this sustainability journey? Are you finding, you, Jill, that it's coming very much from your retailer, but from Harding? Is it coming, Mark, from brands? Andy, do you find it's coming from retailers or airports? Who's actually trying to push this agenda more? And Cheryl as well, obviously from your perspective, it's very much, as you were saying, city imposed as well, but also part of the airport strategy going forward. But are you seeing certain brands or certain retailers really trying to push this more than others? Let's start with you, Jill.
Yeah, so for Virgin, this is who we are. This is embedded into changing business for good. And so from that standpoint, these are the standards and the principles that we uphold. But we also know, based on our target segment of customers, we know that they care about these issues, and that sustainability is very important to them. So I think it's twofold. Okay.
Mark, do you want to follow on?
No, I'd agree with what Jill said. I think, for us, from Harding's perspective, I think we had danced around the edges of it for a couple of years. I think, though, that the partnership then with Virgin, to the point that Cheryl made earlier, it's actually the Virgin direction that's inspired us on this journey. And now we have the bug for it. We see the value from it. We see the benefit that it will bring. And I think now it's much higher on our agenda. We're pushing our brands and our cruise partners to be on the same level and have the same sustainability messages that we've got before. But, you know, to be fair, this was initiated by the partnership that we had with Virgin. And as Jill said, and I had said, you know, it's been part of their DNA from the very start. And that's the bit that's pushed us along this journey and down this journey and this road for the right reasons.
But as James presented the inaugural TRS, Travel Retail Sustainability Forum, it's been very much in your DNA as a company as well, behind the scenes and you know, the wraps and the bins and everything within the offices.
Yeah.
You know, behind the scenes, not just shop front. You've had that in your company DNA for quite a while, I think, already. Yeah,
absolutely. So, you know, the stuff that we do behind the scenes in the offices have been there. I think this is the first time there where we brought this message to the consumer. That's the marked difference here in terms of what we've done with Virgin and what we'll probably do, you know, across all of our other brands into the future.
Okay. Andy, do you want to follow on from that on that question?
Yeah, sure. And we're certainly seeing some of it from retailers, and as mentioned earlier, we are starting to see in those questionnaires or RFPs from retailers an increasing emphasis. We had one example, our annual questionnaire, total weight of the sustainability answers at 30% of the total score. So we are seeing it starting to increase in importance. And with that, it's now driving what I call an internal discussion. And so, you know, our brand teams now want to better understand the sustainability story that each of our brands have to tell, and so that they can, you know, communicate it in a very authentic way. So we're seeing our brand partners really actually driving it from an internal perspective of saying, hey, this is a unique story and we can use this to communicate better with customers and consumers. So we want to be involved and engaged in it. So we're seeing it from both internal and external, which is great.
Okay. That's interesting, the 30% weight. Cheryl, do you want to follow on from that?
Sure. I would say that we are leading the effort. And depending on the business sector, there's different levels of sophistication and engagement. I would say primarily in our local smaller businesses, they have a sensitivity and a sensibility already for green endeavors in their practices. From our larger national and international partners, I would say we're leading the way.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I think San Francisco, I think most airports will be looking to you as kind of the blueprint of going forward on sustainability, given that, you know, you've been doing it for so long and it's very much city imposed as well as your DNA. So, you know, you've got rid of everything, and I know certain airports, the conversations we've been having, will certainly be interested in how you've gone about that. So I think you've got some interesting stories to share there.
Yes, it's exciting.
It is.
Exciting
Well,
time indeed. Right,
I think we need to wrap up there, Luke.
Let's wrap up.
So I'll just finish off before handing over to you, Luke, to say thanks very much to all of you, our panelists, Jill, Cheryl, Mark, and Andy. Thanks to all of you watching. This webinar recording will be available on demand afterwards on the Summit of the Americas website, but also on trbusiness.com very shortly afterwards. So do come and check it out again, or share it with colleagues who have not been able to watch. So we'll be seeing you again, as we said, very soon in a couple of weeks at the Travel Retail Sustainability Week, which is also online, and we look forward to seeing you there. Over to you, Luke.
Thanks very much, Michael. I'd just like to reiterate my thanks to all of our panelists today, Jill, Andy, Mark, and Cheryl. It's been highly insightful and really, really considered comments and some really interesting talking points as we move into a really critical period in the next coming weeks with Travel Retail Sustainability Week. And just to emphasize what Michael said, you know, this is really the platform for you as an industry to engage. And we would encourage you to share your initiatives, interact with us, engage with us, keep the conversation going on sustainability. And as I mentioned in my opening comments, we'll be issuing further information on Travel Retail Sustainability Forum and the Plastic Pledge to support some of the work we've been doing. Thank you very much to all of you once again. Thank you, Michael, and take care and see you very soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.